Exactly. That's well said. So the next thing I'm going to look at is like possible ways that like evolution can be evidence of design. So we can go with like 2 or 3 examples, maybe go through them one at a time. So what do you think, Zach?
Yeah, so this is controversial stuff, and I'm still kind of working it through. So I don't want to say it too strongly, like this is proof or anything like that. But I think there are interesting arguments here that should be explored. So most people probably, I guess, who are watching this are somewhat familiar with like the fine-tuning argument, and I think that's in cosmology. So the idea that the fundamentals of physics are so precisely set up that if they were changed just slightly, life as we know or anything like it could not possibly exist. The atoms wouldn't even stick together, and subatomic particles wouldn't stick together. So it seems like the fundamentals of physics are kind of really on a knife's edge regarding the possibility for life, and they had to be set up really precisely. And I think there's potentially something like this argument can extend in a bunch of directions, including in biology. So it's worth noting that even this cosmological argument is still to do with biology. So it's not completely separate from biology. So that the point is, the reason it works as an argument is because you need this kind of fine tuning in order to get something like life. So this is also, so for someone who says, Darwin completely got rid of biological design arguments, I think the fine tuning argument in cosmology is kind of a good first response. That this is still an argument related to biology, and Darwin obviously has nothing to do with the fine-tuning argument in cosmology. Nothing Darwin said is at all relevant in responding to fine-tuning. Some people think so somehow, but I think they're just obviously just confused. So that's the first thing. The universe is set up in an interesting way, but we can get more specifically biological, which is the concept of the fitness of the environment. So this is a concept developed by a guy called Lawrence Henderson. He's a professor at Harvard in chemistry. He was an agnostic, but he was really interested in this idea of the universe in terms of its chemical properties seems to be set up in a life-friendly way. So there's a bunch of examples of this where he goes through the properties of, actually not sure what he did specifically, but this has been developed more recently by Michael Denton, who goes through the properties of water and the carbon molecule and the way that the fundamentals of biochemistry interact with each other. They also seem to be set up really precisely. If this was different, then life as we know it could not possibly exist. A lot of examples to do with this, to do with the nature of planet Earth being set up for life. This is something that's related. The nature of the solar system. Lots of things, but my favorite example is to do with light. That the light produced by the sun, and by other stars, just happens to have a particular wavelength, and this wavelength of light corresponds because of basic physics to a particular energy, and this is the amount of energy that we need in order to have photosynthesis. So the sun has to produce a particular kind of light in order for it to be used by life for photosynthesis and for vision. And the possible range for that wavelength is really narrow. So this is another example of something that seems to be like fine-tuning. That if light wasn't set up, if the light produced by stars and by the sun wasn't set up very precisely, then we couldn't have photosynthesis, we couldn't have vision, and life would be at least drastically different, and maybe complex life wouldn't even be possible. So yeah, there's a lot of these kind of other kinds of fine-tuning arguments to do with biochemistry, to do with physics, to do with light, that suggest that the environment is set up in a really specific way in order to allow evolution to happen. Yeah, so that was quite long, but that was my first kind of whole area of ideas that you can give based on evolution.
I was just wondering, I was thinking like maybe someone could push back on this though and just be like, well, okay, it's fine-tuned for like life for like us to arise, but maybe there's other kinds of life. Like, like there's a lot of options out here. So maybe we don't need this fine-tuning because, if it's different, well, maybe some other kind of life could arise,
Yeah, so that's possible. That's in this case, that's a potential answer. That's less of an answer in the case of the cosmological fine-tuning. Because when the cosmological fine-tuning, we're talking about like atoms being able to stick together or really basic things like that. So you can't have any kind of complex chemistry or anything like it if the universe is not fine-tuned at the cosmological level. At these higher levels, like to do with chemistry and biochemistry and getting into biology, it's going to be harder because we can't understand the alternatives so well because these things are so complicated. We don't know if there could be other kinds of light, other kinds of life that don't rely on, so other kinds of complex life that don't rely on photosynthesis and such. So there's life on Earth that doesn't rely on photosynthesis, but it seems that you can't have a complex ecosystem without photosynthesis, as we know it. So for our life, photosynthesis is really crucial, and so is vision. So vision evolved multiple times on Earth. It seems to be a really crucial part of evolution. And the same arguments apply that unless you have a very specific wavelength, you're not going to be able to get vision because vision requires a particular biochemical reaction. So maybe there's other possible kinds of life, but at least it's really surprising for the people who discovered this. They were really impressed by this and drew some metaphysical conclusions from it, even though they weren't Christians, they weren't theists. So there was a guy called George Wilde who was a Nobel Prize winner. He was an agnostic, but he was really impressed with this. And because of this and a couple of other things, decided that at the foundation of the universe, it must be mind, because these things seem to be pointing in this kind of mind-like direction, that the things seem to be set up too precisely, basically, to be just the result of naturalism. So this is someone who had no theistic inclination, no theistic background, leading scientist, Nobel Prize winner. But yeah, so these things were really surprising enough to be persuasive for people. So it's at least interesting. It's not proof, but it's I would say it's evidence that the universe is fine-tuned at a really deep level, not just at the cosmological level, but also in physics and chemistry and biochemistry.